The simplest way to explain what Modica Group does is all of those text messages you get from your bank, your airline, your insurance company. We were approached by one of our banking clients who said, hey, everyone's ringing us up, it's costing us $10 a call on the phone. Is there any chance you can do it by SMS? Because I think I can do it for 20 cents. We interact with probably 4 million New Zealanders a month, so it's most of the adult population and then some.
This week on the show, I have Stuart Wilson from Modica Group, Chief Executive of an intelligent messaging company with a really interesting backstory. Maybe if you're not in the technology or B2B space, you may not have heard of Modica Group, but this is an organization that underpins many of the essential services that Kiwis rely on every day. But it's more than that, and we're going to cover what the growth evolution of Modica Group has been over the past few years, particularly how they've been rolling out some of their services internationally. So Stu and I actually go back a little bit of time. So it's great to actually be able to do one of these and give you a bit of a platform for what you've been up to, Stu. So thanks for coming on the show.
Well, pleasure, Ryan. And I think we had a lot more hair when we started this.
We certainly did, and it was a different colour as well. Things have evolved over the year, but I think that's just it shows wisdom and experience as much as anything else. So let's start with the basics. Modica Group, what does the company do, and why do you exist?
Yeah, so I've been doing tech startups for 25, 30 years now, and this one's been my longest. The simplest way to explain what Modica Group does is all of those text messages you get from your bank, your airline, your insurance company, doctors, dentists, appointment reminders. So we sit behind most of the large enterprises in New Zealand, helping them communicate with their customers on their mobile phones. We interact with probably 4 million New Zealanders a month, so it's most of the adult population and then some. But we sit quietly in the background, so probably not too many people have heard of us.
What did New Zealand do before services like yours? Was it all call centres and letters? Where was the communication before text messaging came around?
So showing my age, we built the first kind of web-to-text platform back in about 1997. And it was a Vodafone special back then, or even a Bell South special. Then it really got legs in about 2002. We put our success down to having an ISP background, building big sort of hosting websites and that kind of thing. We were approached by one of our banking clients who said, hey, everyone's ringing us up, it's costing us $10 a call on the phone in the call centre. Is there any chance you can do it by SMS? Because I think I can do it for 20 cents. So 2002, 2003, we built what we think is probably the first SMS balance banking service in the world. And I put it down to his idea and our innovation, and it sort of kicked on from then.
So you've been in the tech space for some time in New Zealand. Talk me through, I don't know, maybe a couple of key projects that you're super proud of in that time of what Modica Group's managed to deliver.
Yeah. I hope to say I started about 92 building one of the country's first ISPs, commercial internet service providers out of Vic Uni, as a shiny 22-year-old. Fast forward to Modica Group, we had three parts of the business: web development, internet, and mobile. We've subsequently focused purely on the mobile piece. We've gone from a startup, I'm particularly proud of going from a startup with 2 or 3 people paying salaries on our credit cards, to over 50 people now operating globally. We can put a message on pretty much every device on the planet from our platform. Customers in about 18 countries. They're sending to global handsets. People in Latin America, Asia, a few in Europe. So we're a sort of small global company, but based in New Zealand. And for me, that's a good New Zealand story. That tyranny of distance doesn't really apply so much.
And your customers, those international ones, they're actually entire ecosystems of their own, aren't they? They're like the the Spark or the Vodafone within an entire different country. You're providing them the infrastructure, is it the software, the hardware? What are the things that they buy from you that they can't get anywhere else, or they decide that they're not going to make on their own?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Probably in layman's terms, colloquial terms, it's a big website. Trendy terms like cloud-based platform. So big website with a lot of tools that allow people like banks to connect to our platform, and then they can send and receive messages to phones. So when you're doing your online banking, you hit go, you get SMS that code to two-factor complete your transaction. Behind the scenes, the bank is connected to us, and we're connected to the telcos. So our platform, we sell them our platform where they can white label it. They have all the technology instantly. So rather than having to build it themselves, they can roll out a whole new sort of suite of services in the country in a matter of weeks. So you're taking away risk, you're helping them generate new revenue, and you can do it very quickly. So today's environment, they're not looking to try and build these things over the next 5 years and maybe get it wrong. So we take away that risk. So they're buying tech, but they're also buying know-how. So we're sort of almost, beginning to end business in a box. We help them sell, we help them deliver. We continually innovate. So all of the development team is still in New Zealand. We are trying to change that a little bit, which presents some challenges, both getting access to more talent, probably reducing our risk. I mean, it's probably as topical as any. Most of our software development teams in Wellington, which is earthquake prone. So we're starting to think about that. So it's been exciting. We've got quite a growing team in Sydney and a growing team in the Dominican Republic. So there's a big LATAM influence now coming into the business.
Why the Dominican Republic? That seems, out of all the countries you could choose, I can understand Australia, New Zealand, of course. Where did the Dominican Republic come from?
So the flippant answer is I met a girl in a bar, and we got chatting, and her and her husband lived in the Dominican Republic. And they kind of reached out to us and said, hey, meet you at this conference. We think we could be your partners here. Can we take you to market in the Dominican Republic? And being Kiwis, we went, sure, let's give it a go. That was 9 years ago. So we're the biggest messaging company in the Dominican Republic of all places, with a local partner. That was more a sales partnership, and it's grown over time. And now we jointly employ people. There's a lot of talent in that part of the world that isn't well paid, and there aren't a lot of jobs. So we're trying to tap into that. So 6 employees in Santo Domingo, and we're hopefully going to add about 3 or 4 of that over the coming months and expand their reach.
With services over there, does your partner there tend to roll out the same type of services that you offer here? So two-factor authentication between banks and the telecoms companies for secure consumer transactions, or are they purchasing different sets of services that are possible within your platform?
That was actually one of our learning curves, because we thought, it's tech. It's exactly the same in New Zealand, and it's going to be the same in the world. And how it works is the same. What people do with it is different. And that's very reflective of social economic factors, just cultural factors. So, Dominican Republic's a second world, arguably third world country. So while we're all getting our cars services and getting text reminders and doing doctors and dentists and taking our pets to the vet, that segment of society doesn't really exist in those countries. So a lot of it is security, banking, two-factor authentication. We do love that country because there's so much fraud. Every time you swipe your card, you get a text message.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. But they're not all taking their pets to the vet. They're not doing truancy alerts for school. There's no sort of public healthcare and government engagement. So there are sectors of the market that are missing.
And is that, if you were to put that on a kind of a diagram, do different countries then buy different suites of services? And is that culturally driven, or is that driven by your partners?
So we, inside the platform, there's a suite of different services from sort of plumbing all the way through to kind of tools for radio stations or government agencies. So we made a decision a decade ago, everyone gets everything. And use it or don't. And what they actually did is actually freed us up, because you start building a very complex model that, Stu can get product A and B. So Stu and Ryan can get product B, but Sally and Paula can only get product A, and there's features. So you start ending up these complex business models. And we went, look, just have it. Pass a fee and have it. So the market's really determined what they want to use. We give the partners case studies and use cases and all that kind of thing, but as I said, banking always globally, two-factor authentication, security, banking, alerts is always there. And then it's really sort of more social aspects that disappear. And we also get the other way, things that we never thought would happen. There were certain frauds that would never occur in New Zealand that happen in other countries. So we had to build into the platform a lot more logging and security, because we're a trust-based society and some of those aren't. We ran the biggest text competition in the Dominican Republic, and it was one of those ones where you buy cooking oil, take the top off, there's a code in there, you text it in to enter. So in New Zealand, those are big. Dominican Republic, everybody started stealing the bottle tops out of the supermarket to enter the competition and win the prize. And then turned it into a scam, and it just exploded to the end that the government actually called the service because it behaved in a manner that you'd never expect in this country.
It's funny, isn't it, that you can roll out technology, but the cultural imperatives and how people interpret that new service or benefit can be very different and sometimes unintended. With the services between your partners and yourself, sometimes it's challenging to get the balance right between how much you take as the maker of the service versus how much value your partner adds on. How do you get that balance right with the types of services you deliver?
It's kind of an interesting question, because typically in tech, you've got a partner like that, you might give them somewhere between 10 and 20% margin, or even maybe 25% margin. But when you're not manufacturing a good and shipping it, your risk goes down massively. We're shipping electrons, and if somebody doesn't pay us for those electrons, it's not the end of the world. So we flipped it on its head and said, well, let's pick Dominican Republic. How much am I earning today in the Dominican Republic? Well, nothing. What are the chances of us earning some money in the Dominican Republic in this lifetime without this partner? Well, nothing. So why wouldn't we just give them half? So basically we do it a rev share, they sell it, they bill it and collect it, so they do the dangerous hard stuff locally. We run the tech, the bill goes out, we subtract direct costs, we go 50-50. It's probably reflective of us as a business as well. It's like, well, let's share the wealth, let's grow the company. We get massive benefits. Well, that cultural engagement for New Zealanders is amazing. You've got a bunch of Kiwis that might not have travelled that work for us here, and suddenly they're dealing with Spanish speakers. Pop quiz, what's the capital of the Dominican Republic? And I'm pretty sure 50 Modicans know what it is. The same with Qatar, it was like Doha, because we did a partnership with Vodafone in the Middle East. So the benefits from dealing globally for New Zealanders are amazing. We've got, out of the 50 people, we've got 11 nationalities and 23 languages.
Wow.
And it's just like, wow, there's something kind of funky going on here.
Let's move on to that, the people side of it and the talent side of it. You hear, or particularly read in business books, that it gets hard at particular sizes of business, whether it's number of employees or number of markets or total revenue. Were there any particular points along your growth curve that it got a little bit difficult with the size that you were getting to, that you had to actually rebuild the company or refocus the company from what it was to what it had to become?
It got hard about the day after we had the launch party, but and there were three of us. Yeah, you hear people talk about it, sort of 5, 15, 20. I think the magic number is 5, 15, 20, 30, and so on. Where you go from you all can't have a conversation in the room. We've always been dispersed though, so that helped us from day one. Recently, we've gone over 50 and we want to add another 25.
That's a big jump.
Yeah. And we did a restructure, and that word's been, that's a dirty word. And the second we said to the team, we're going to do a restructure, it was like, am I getting fired? What's going wrong? Are we going broke? And it's like, no. It's just not working, and we need to reorganize how we're doing things to make it work. The challenge there is in New Zealand, there's not a lot of experience. We've gone over 50 and we're going well on our way to 100. Not many people have done that in New Zealand. So even finding the HR advice to go, so how do you structure a high growth tech company that's delivering product daily, real time, and all the way through to recruitment process. So we've become more process driven as we get bigger. And it's getting harder to sort of work out what's next because you are in uncharted territory, both HR-wise, structure-wise. I kind of like that, and even technically, it's like, we were doing 10 million transactions last month, now we're doing 60. The databases are getting huge. There's not many people in New Zealand that get to work on stuff that big. We're every day is a shiny new challenge.
With those, you say you're on your way to 100 people, with 25 being hired. How do you make sure that your, the culture that you started with the three of you, how do you keep that moving when you're a distributed team? Because you're not all in one location where you can easily keep a view. And I think this probably has more importance over the coming months, maybe years, for businesses that are forced or are going to continue to be remote first. You seem quite ahead of the game there. What's the things that have worked for you?
So day one, we said geography's not going to matter to us. If we're going to be we didn't really think about global company back then, but we did think about distributed and not a New Zealand company. So the founding shareholders, I think, one was in Wellington, one was in Christchurch, and I was in Auckland. So on day one, we weren't in the same place, which helped. So in the early days, we were into chat and cloud-based storage. This is back in 2002, before the cloud existed and AWS existed. So we built the company around that on day one, to think about culture and values because, we're all shareholders and all for one for all. Against my cynical better judgment, we recently completed Modica Values, which felt like a bit of an HR, I didn't really want to get into all of my sapphire values and everybody sort of feels like into a corporate HR kind of thing. But it's important. But we made those, we went round and round and round and actually made them honest values, like focusing on real people issues. So you got to create that framework, but you still need to keep it real from the people that wanted, a strong cultural company. It'll change and grow, and you can't sort of, you can't tip too much water into your coffee because it's going to get diluted no matter how much you want to try and keep it all together. Our recruitment process hinders us but helps us. It's a very stringent process. And by the time you cannot offer someone an employment contract without one of the founders having interviewed them.
Mm-hmm. So you still keep that as like a personal responsibility thing?
Yeah, which is an absolute nightmare because my inbox is full of, hey, I want to hire Ryan. Can you just have the final chat to him? trying to get this guy on board really fast. And I'm like, yeah, 2021 looks good. So we keep that there, and it hurts, but it'd be very easy to sort of shy away from it. But just eyeballing people and talking to them and making sure they're kind of our sort of people, I think is important. Doing that in a foreign language is challenging. And then you're into more exhibited behaviours than you are being able to read them. So we've got some new partners in Indonesia. Now, my Bahasa Indonesian is pretty poor. So what you do though is you see how they behave, how they treat people, how innovative and entrepreneurial they are, and that's indicative of what kind of people they are. So, and we are like, well, you've got to take a chance. And if they're putting it out there and they're taking a chance, they're our kind of people. Sorry, long answer to your question, but very difficult. You do need process, but you've got to stay on top of people creating process for safety versus creating process to maintain culture and innovation and entrepreneurship. So we do pull up our own process quite a lot. So this is not working. Like we did the org chart, we got right to the end, and I think it was our head of operations. He's like, this is dumb, doesn't work. I'm like, oh, fuck. It's like, really? 6 months? He's like, yeah, this is not going to work. And we're like, yeah, you're right. Then start again. So
that takes a very high trust culture to be able to have those conversations. And certainly from the members of your team that I've met from 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you've managed to keep that, at least on the part of the journey that I've ducked in and out of. So I think that's certainly a testament for your leadership, because certainly it takes a leader to make that happen. From outside of work, how do you then make sure that you've got your own energy levels up? Where do you go to for inspiration, or is it actually the team that keeps you going?
I've kind of transitioned. It used to be I'd take an external. It was external, always the ocean. I grew up in Taranaki, and if I can't see the ocean or a mountain, I get a little bit tetchy. Sorry, Palmerston North and Hamilton, it is not working for me. Nothing against those fine cities, of course. So the ocean and the mountains were always very important pieces. As you get older, the knees aren't so great. The mountain climbing is not so prevalent. And the business and its growth and where it was heading felt really exciting. I got a lot of energy from that. In the last 2 years, it's been pretty intense. And probably, I might argue, all-consuming. And I think I've probably lost a bit of energy. Started this year with the right reset. Get back to some external energy, which sounds very sort of hippie and kumbaya. But taking those breaks, taking those deep breaths, stop doing so much of the doing and think about that. The big difference is, and I think a lot of small business owners would say this, or startup people, is, it ends up being an extension of your life. I don't go to work. In fact, work from home, we've got 50 families, soon to be 75 families. We're enabling people's aspirations, mine included, but that's reasonably purposeful than deciding I want to take up fishing. So they're inextricably linked, and even my kids know about what's going on with the business. Business partner, his daughters came into, and started with they were 17 and 18, they went to meetings with some of the account managers. They don't teach business at school. So yeah, it's kind of a family values thing, which sounds a bit cheesy and old school, but it is. And even this with the recent, the COVID-19 issues, we're spending a lot of time going, are people looked after? Are they, do they have issues? Reassuring them that, we're continuing and they're going to get paid. That's as important as doing business. So, gosh, I won't answer again. I get a lot of energy from our wins. It's when you don't win for periods of time that I find it hard. And that's when you need to fill that with external energy, getting out and deep breath and some exercise and some ocean air. Been away for, everyone says they're kind of happy for me to take 1 week holidays, but if it's 2 weeks, I start thinking. And the email usually starts with, I've been thinking. And the team goes, oh, no. Just got it under control.
Sorry to interrupt. This won't take long. Subscribe to the show and you'll never miss another one of these amazing episodes. Right, back to the show. Yeah, I mean, it's good to have that time out. I mean, I'm surprised over the years that you've held on to the company, because at many stages you probably, I don't know, but you were probably approached, or you probably decided, I've had enough and I could exit now. But it's a very rare New Zealand company that stays the course and goes beyond the batch, the BMW, and so on. And I'm maybe I'm putting words in your mouth here, but from what you've just been saying, the people aspect of it has now become as big as your own personal goals. Would that be a summation, or is that kind of off where you were heading?
It's kind of like that. I mean, ironically, I care more about people than I used to, which is a nice outcome. I think having kids will do that too, but I see the company as an extension of people's families. That's how they pay their bills. It's how they live their lives and achieve their goals, part of it. So that is really important to us. I loved the guys at Sistema. When they sold Sistema for 600 million, where it was like, yep, and part of the deal is you must keep the people and you must keep manufacturing in New Zealand. It's like, that. And they said no the first time around because of that.
Is that right?
Huh? And people make that mistake. People buy New Zealand companies and then eventually wind up the New Zealand operation and then wonder why it didn't work, because they lost all that talent. So I'm partially interested in that. I also like the concept that both me and a Kiwi company can do things globally. That job is nowhere near done. We've scratched the surface, but I don't feel successful in that regard yet. We're a pretty awesome business in Australia and New Zealand. We're just scratching the surface in Asia and Latin America, but ask me next year, when that's big and employing people and it's working, that's exciting. We get approached regularly to get bought. Generally they make it easy because they're not particularly fun people. So it's easy to say no to that. The numbers never have been big enough that you just went, oh my God, yeah, I've got to do this. So there's going to be challenges in that regard. We recently did a capital raise, and we're fortunate enough that it was a private New Zealand family that invested in the end. Mm-hmm. But they still took a smallish shareholding, so we still control most of the company by founding shareholders, so we still control their future. There's going to be challenges in that coming up though, but I mean, I'm pretty happy. We've got runway now for the next 2.5 years to execute on our strategic plan without diluting, without taking in foreign capital. So it's up to the CEO guy to do his job for the next 2 years, and then it's going to be a rather interesting conversation.
You've always been someone that has certainly been passionate about New Zealand and isn't shy, I'd say, to put your opinion forward either on behalf of Modica or over a beer or two when we've caught up. Where do you think New Zealand should end up as a country? If we're successful by the time we've retired in 15, 20, 25 years, looking down the track, what are all the barriers we need to get rid of, or what are the things that we're already doing well that we need to scale? Is there what's your take on New Zealand's future?
That's a big question.
It is it is. I mean,
like sticking in the tech sector. I mean, I didn't even train as a tech guy. I paid for university scrap cutting in the back of Taranaki. So it was a lot. In fact, there weren't mobile phones, the internet, or computers back then. So, it's not like I was born to be a tech guy. The biggest barrier is the shift has not yet happened. The penny hasn't dropped. It's just starting. Tech's now, it's been, I think it's the third largest exporter in the country. I think it's third. And yet we're still obsessing with Fonterra and logs and sheep meat and wool, So we haven't made that transition from a commodities society to a tech society. And New Zealand's biggest barrier is distance, and tech doesn't have that problem. So I think firstly, that shift in understanding the value that it can bring to New Zealand, and what's going on now, tech businesses are going to be less affected. I mean, okay, if they're in tourism or hospitality, they're going to hurt, but they're also got global safety nets, so the world's not going wrong at the same time. Everyone says this, but it's true. The financial markets just suck. If you're going to put 10 million into something, buy a property in Auckland. That's it. Zero and Treaty changed the landscape a little. There are still people that think zero is a Ponzi scheme. So institutional and government thinking hasn't actually truly embraced the returns to the New Zealand economy. And then you get into the hard stuff, is the visionary leadership. Like, look at what Singapore's doing, Bitcoin and initial coin offerings. They've created the new flavor of stock exchange. And New Zealand's going, what's an ICO? And Singapore's got one of the few independent coin offering exchanges in the world. It's building the stock exchange of the future. They've sorted digital identity, which means, they can do a whole lot from taxation to government to catch and train seamlessly in one place. Of course, the privacy nuts think they're just doing it to spy on the population, but New Zealand has the checks and balances. So we're not having that strategic thinking as a nation. We're just trying to catch up on maybe the tech business is good. For me, I'm passionate. It's like, there's high value, long-term jobs for New Zealanders in New Zealand and the New Zealand economy if we can make this work. I'm really excited about that. I've been putting a lot of thinking into, we got approached for looking at the regional economic development funds. And they're like, well, can you set up in Westport? I think, maybe not. But we started looking at that seriously, and I suddenly realised, given that New Zealand's so small, if you go and build an office I'll pick an example, just talking Whangarei Heads, small communities, small towns, you go build a 10-person office there. That's actually significant in New Zealand. And as tech companies get bigger and can remote work, I can put 10 people in Whangarei Heads or Kaitaia. There's a few rules, but it actually could be done. You can create an economy. Look at Rocket Lab and Straker Translations. They're creating an economy in Gisborne. And you only need 2 guys or 2 companies and 10 people. And that's enough in New Zealand. And tech enables that. So I'm kind of starting to go, well, how do I make that happen? But it's still a private individual to do it. You've got millions of dollars being navel-gazed about regional economic development, and Straker and Rocket Lab let's just go do that. So why is it that we're talking up supporting the tech sector, but it's still just down to private companies to do their own thing? That was a long-ranging answer, but I just think the future of New Zealand, let's keep doing all the stuff we're doing, but let's do some extra stuff that just gives us natural advantage and increases the quality of life and the wealth of New Zealand.
Nice. I mean, I think it's an admirable vision. It is pragmatic because you don't need all companies.
Value pragmatism.
Yeah, like you don't need every single company in New Zealand to become tech. You just need a few of the tech companies to realize opportunity in regions. At the same time, you don't need big scale in order to deliver value to those regions. I think the challenge part is, how do you take a New Zealand manufacturer that does some good stuff already that maybe isn't software centric and add a software element to it? And then we're getting the best of both, because you mentioned that New Zealand's big on exporting of goods, certainly commodities. That's where historically we've come from. Goods the world over is actually shrinking in terms of volume. It's services that are on the growth path, and they can be service-enabled goods. And I think there could be a potential opportunity. But for manufacturers that don't necessarily have the tech upbringing that you or I have had, where do they start where they are machinery, mechanic, certainly digitalization within the machines? Where do they start to think about intangibles, like the services that aren't picked up by a courier?
I have a theory on this.
I knew you would.
We're all in their little verticals, right? And what's easy for me is hard for someone else. And what's hard for someone else is another person thinks of you. So, you go to a small town in New Zealand, right? And I don't know, the blokes need to weld a frame and build a shed and all that. And all of us sort of guys working in office going, how the hell are you going to do that? And there'll be some bloke with a gas axe and a welder and done. For them, really easy. For us, really hard. And I think tech's the same. We look at a school or we look in the community and they're struggling with some really basic issues, and you're like, oh, well, if you do this, this, and this with tech, it's fixed. So the problem is, how do you glue those two together? And that's where you innovate and see opportunity. So I don't know, you need some tech people sitting around in traditional businesses listening to all the problems and all the difficulties and all the stuff that can't be done, and go, well, yeah, that's easy for me. I know how to fix that. Classic example might be, you're running machinery and you've got to get the guy to Timaru to run it all the time. Well, if it's digitized, does that person have to be in the factory running it?
Yeah. And I've seen that with a company that they make drill bits. They've been making them for 50 years. Some of the machinery is 50 years old. They actually have the technology expertise internally. With a bit of Raspberry Pi and coding, they've now got digital dashboards that control machines bought a year ago, and plus retrofitted control machines 5 decades ago. And they export into Asia because their products are better quality, lower fail rate, at a lower price than they can produce in Asia. And I wonder whether it's not a productivity issue we have, it's a technology enabled productivity issue.
Yeah, to transfer that, but you need both the technology and the problem to truly, I spend a lot of time talking to our techs, even now, listening to their problems, because for them, if it's a problem, they can't. Classic example, you have 5 engineers that bitch and moan about a certain reporting thing. You eventually hear it often enough, you go, that's a problem. Yeah, well, what's the problem? Oh, well, we have to do this manual thing. I'm like, well, why are you doing this manual thing? Oh, well, there's a piece of code software we could buy, but it's $1,000 a month. So 7 of you sit around for 4 hours a month worrying about this thing that will cost $1,000 a month. Yeah, because we don't have the budget and we don't want to spend the money. So I'm going, well, I understand how to fix this problem, but I didn't even know it existed. Now I know it existed. We glued 2 worlds together and we can fix it. Is that the answer to everything? No, but I just think it's technology transfer and problem transfer between verticals. There's plenty of people in this country that know how to fix stuff that I would find really difficult. But for them, it's easy because they do it every day. So yeah, it's a problem transfer and a tech transfer between industries. That's my theory.
Good theory. What, Stu? What question haven't I asked you, or an area that you'd like to talk about that maybe I haven't touched on?
That's a bold question.
Well, I want to hand it over. I don't want to leave it without you making sure we cover what we need to cover.
I'm not sure. For me, it's and I think what you're doing for the first time ever is celebrating New Zealand business heroes. There's people in this country that even be uncomfortable calling them heroes. So it's that, as a country, how do we not only applaud but demand and support where New Zealand needs to get to next? Like, you've probably created more community in understanding New Zealand businesses than anybody has ever. How do we do that? Like, exporting Kiwi companies and tech companies, it's getting better. Like, I talked to the guy, I forget his name, runs a Tin 100. That's one of the first attempts to corral tech businesses into one place. And he's the one that's bringing a lot of attention. What's the addition to GDP? What's the addition to employment? Prior to that, nobody's done it. So for me, it's like, how do we absolutely encourage and applaud and promote New Zealand businesses, personally in tech, but even broader than that, on the global stage? Because when we saw, I think it's Casino, the movie, the guys were in LA, they set up the casinos in Vegas, and the guys in Vegas are like, we can do whatever we want as long as the suitcases of money keep coming back to LA. And for me, I want to see the suitcases of money coming to New Zealand, and even rural New Zealand or regional New Zealand. So, how do we help companies get this done? And we have the will. Given what's going on now with COVID-19, okay, it's a national crisis. But what if it was a national opportunity? Everybody's just gone, let's get this done. And we've got agencies dedicated to that. So just that passionate belief of we're going to step change New Zealand as a society, because it flows into education, schooling, quality of life, healthcare, if we can afford it. And we're not going to afford it chopping down trees and growing cows. So that's my passion, how do you get those large suitcases of money coming back to New Zealand? And I'll finish that, sort of MIT. There are more suitcases of money going to MIT than the entire New Zealand economy. One university in America, because they invented a bunch of stuff. And what does New Zealand look like when we've had 10 zeros? Not just one, where people are still in denial now, it was one off, it doesn't count. What if we've had 10? And there's 100 new millionaires in our country, and they're starting 10 more. Then you've got that critical mass of inbound wealth, and it's not going to be the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. It's going to be, let's grow businesses and change the face of New Zealand society for the better, I think. How do we do that?
I think it's a big question. It's one that I want to continue to try and at least contribute in my small way to be able to answer at least part of it. I think when you share stories, collisions happen, and they're good collisions of ideas, and then people go off and something shifts from there. I'm also a big fan that business is a force of good in New Zealand, as it is elsewhere, but particularly in New Zealand, businesses employ over 97% of Kiwis. It is a massive, massive number. 600,000 employees, 1 to 5 is the kind of size that we're all at. But how do we get that 1 to 5 to become 20, and 25 like yours is, and then 50 like yours has become, and then 75 to 100, like that growth? That's how we can step change New Zealand. And I think, the job that you're doing and going through both the good times and hard times, make sure that those employees that rely on your business get to feed their families, get to pay their mortgage, and get to keep the game going. So those suitcases of money get shared around evenly. But I do think there's a part there for government to play where, maybe there's a competition for some suitcases of cash like SpaceX, but it's NZ, it's New Zealand X. Like, what's the North Star that everyone could participate in that has a technology element, that collisions happen within New Zealand manufacturers, that maybe something new comes out of it, that we can create an MIT equivalent in one of our industries. So, it requires more than just a few of us. It requires probably thousands of us. And by having these conversations helps that.
I think it does. And probably lastly, you shouldn't be afraid of watching Singapore. How do you take what at the time was almost a third world country we gave aid to, and in a very short period of time make it one of the richest, most go-forward countries in the world? And yeah, there's a lot of debates about their structure and form of government, but New Zealand's close to them. We're probably one of their best friends. They have the will to get stuff done, and I think we could learn a lot from that.
Good advice, Stu, as has been peppered throughout this interview. I always enjoy our chats because they start off at ground level and head to 35 and 50,000 feet pretty quickly. So for the listeners and the watchers on YouTube, thanks very much for following along to this entire chat with one of my very good friends, Stu Wilson, who is the chief exec of Modica Group. And Stu, I really appreciate you being on the show and giving your very expensive time and insights that I know you've earned over the years. So good luck with the coming growth phase of Modica Group, and keep bringing those suitcases of cash back to New Zealand for the rest of us to enjoy the ecosystem that you're creating.
Thanks, Ryan. The suitcases are still a little empty. We're working on that, but look, I appreciate the opportunity, and I think what you're doing is amazing, and keep showcasing all those awesome New Zealand companies.
That's great. I appreciate the feedback. This has been a Kiwi original brought to you by the New Zealand Made team. Thanks for watching. The New Zealand Made trademark is used by over 1,200 businesses in New Zealand. The New Zealand Made team licenses that trademark. Check if you're eligible at bynz.org.nz. If you feel that someone should see this, share it with them now. Otherwise, subscribe to youtube.com/bynzmade, and we'll see you on the next episode.